All right, ladies and gentlemen, I meant to get this podcast to you a couple months ago, but like I said previously, life got in the way a little bit. I was able to sit down with John Dudley and John Barklow for just about 2 hours and start to dig into some survival-based questions. And I received many more questions than we were able to answer, but what I tried to do was take a broad cross-section of all of the questions that I was, in fact, asked, put them in front of them, and we kind of answered them in a collaborative fashion. And this is the first of, I would say, at least 2 or 3 more. So this I'm going to call the Survival Podcast 101. This is for the people maybe not necessarily hunting specific, just generally outdoor specific, but it's our first dipping our toes into the pool of the survival questions. So I'm not going to say too much. I'm just going to let you guys get into it because it's 2 hours of Q&A from your Q and RA. So here you go. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
The only thing I saw turkey hunting was a cow that I took a picture of and
I've
sent
got
to Dudley.
I've got that picture.
I love that
That
picture.
put its head into the blind.
It's
and
like Oprah was looking into the blind.
basically.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking we should call this Survival 101 because we're going to need to do 102.
Are we recording already?
Oh, yeah.
I actually think we
God.
need to see what we're going to say
Of course
first
we are.
before we call it anything.
I hit record because I can edit the in anytime we want to, but you never know what's going to happen.
You will not.
I probably
edit.
won't.
Yeah, that everyone.
So this
welcome
was
to Cleared Hot.
Totally hot and hard, even though this episode is not brought to you by BlueChew.com. This should have happened in May. Life got in the way, and I got a ton of questions. So I have about 7 that I think we'll cover.
Getting right into business, going right in there.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to explain to you guys why I think we should call it Survival 101, because I have way more questions than this, and I think we should do it again at some point. We can't overload people.
Dude, we got 3 hours. Let's freaking bang them out. Do your longest Cleared Hot podcast ever.
Oh, man.
Let's do the. Let's do it the CHE, the Cleared Hot experience.
Him
3
and Rogan
hours.
set the standard where they got up and pissed once each. You have to get up and piss
The
twice.
first 2
now.
times I didn't piss, but the last time I didn't really know we were podcasting that day, so I was
Hydrated.
deep into the angel's wings, and he's like, should we do this? I'm like, are we doing it today? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, dude, I'm lit right now. I thought we were just shooting. So yeah, I went into a dark place.
That's what's fun with Snyder is he doesn't drink, and it could be a 15-minute podcast, and he's got to get up and piss right in the middle of it. And I'm like, I'm trying to fill time in the middle of the podcast
Thanks for
while he's
letting me
peeing,
know.
and I'm like, so I just like talk. I'm just like talking and just giving this long-winded answer while he's in the bathroom.
Okay, well now I know not to invite him whitetail hunting.
Yeah, 15-minute bladder's not going to
Rogan
work.
was bad
Yeah.
enough having to take a deuce off my #1 stand. I'm like,
Are you?
he's like, dude, I got
You're
a shit.
kidding me.
Yeah, he MCT oiled up, and then he's freaking totally doing drywall mud splatter all across my timber, like
On
literally
your #1 stand.
#1.
Yeah.
Isn't that going to
Yeah.
make the animals not come in that direction?
Yeah, we're live.
We don't
Yeah.
do live.
We could be live whenever.
We're recording, though.
Semi-live. Yeah, we're recording. I'll continue to
No, I need to
tell the
I need to understand
what.
why you stayed in those stands after that. Wouldn't that be?
We didn't.
I was going to say, what you'd always tell me is you can't beat their nose, and if a dude is hanging drywall in a tree stand, how are you?
This is hilarious.
Because the deer's like, there's nobody dumb enough to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I told Joe, I said, hey, going in, I said, we're literally gonna be in a stand 13 hours. He's like, okay.
It should be like
And I said, you gotta
30
know
minutes till those are done.
that we're gonna be in 13 hours. He said, yeah, no problem. And he's so used to elk hunting, you're going, whereas this is a chess match. And
Yeah.
I really wanted him to get a really good whitetail, and those things, they're looking long before you see them. A mature Midwestern whitetail.
Where were you guys? Oh, you were at your house.
Yeah.
in Iowa.
Mhm.
Okay.
And they're looking long before you see them. And I said, all right, be real still. And he's like, okay. And I actually have video where he's just freaking bouncing. He's standing up and he's tight to the tree, but he's just like moving like an inch and a half up and down and up and down and up and down. And I'm just videoing the whole time. And then he looks at me and he's like, kind of gives me a thumbs up. I'm like, yep. But
what camo pattern was on his face? Was it the cat?
I painted the kitty cat. It was and we made it till about noon, and then he said, what do you think? And I said, man, I'm telling you, between 11 and 1's my favorite time. And he's like, I got to shit right now. And I said, really? Like bad? And he goes, yeah. And I said, all right. I go, just go down quiet. I said, let your bow down, because I said, take your bow. And I said, if something comes, I'm just going to film you from up here. So then he kind of went off, painted the woods, came tiptoeing back and literally got to the bottom of the tree, shimmied up to the top of the tree, and he's there like, I don't know, about 30 minutes. I could see it by like his fidgeting that I'm like, he's not going to be able to, like, he wants to change spots. And then he's like, should we move somewhere else? And I'm like, if you want to. I said, but we're not taking a break. We're literally moving and getting in a tree. And he's like, all right. So I said, just go down real quiet, man. So he shimmies down the tree and he literally gets on the ground. All of a sudden I'm like, I just drop something and it like hits the ground next to him. He looks up at me and I point down the woods. And there was 3 bucks on a doe and they're just coming. And I literally go, get behind the tree. And he gets behind the tree. And then I told him, I kind of gestured as like, get the bow forward. And I go, if you can shoot, just shoot. I said, I'll film him. So he's on the ground and these bucks come through. And this one with he was like, we called him Big Red, just this real wide buck, just real red in the face. He literally comes into like 20 yards and Joe's kind of sitting there like peeking around each side of the tree. And this buck just freaking pegs him like nothing. And they all run off. And then he starts coming up the tree really quiet. And I go, dude, we're leaving now. And he goes, what? I'm like, it's blown. And he's like, really? And I go, yeah, they're not coming back ever. And he's like, oh. I said, go down. So we got out, went to another spot, and then
but by ever you mean ever?
Well, I meant like probably that month.
What if they had busted you in the tree?
I don't know. It's different, especially when there's 3 of them. I mean, it's not like it was one and he saw something he didn't really know what it was. Or sometimes when they smell you and don't really know that you're necessarily in that tree, like you could have been there a few minutes ago. But when they put all the pieces of the puzzle together, really mature animals, they don't need to be told twice that.
So if they see a dude in camo that looks like a cat with a bow,
yeah,
they're out.
Cat face. I think he had a hat on, so yeah.
Oh,
well, I mean, he literally
smells like shit. They're like, we're out of here.
Smells like shit. Hands like Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Freaking sharp broadhead pointing at them and painted like a cat face. They're like, we're out of here. What is this?
We are going to Nebraska.
Silverback just mounted a damn tree leopard and shit on itself, and there's Rogan. Yeah, it was a fun hunt, but
having never hunted with him, I would imagine he would struggle sitting still that long.
Once like he's great about, he's very adaptive to anything. So a lot of times he listens and some things he takes right away, but some things he almost wants it proven, which is his personality, because that's what he does on his podcast. He's always devil's advocate. Well, maybe they don't, well, what if, or I don't know, what about this side? He always plays both sides, which is great, especially for what he does. But in that case, I think once he saw that animal and how it reacted versus interactions that he had with elk, he's like, oh, okay. And then from there on out, he was a rock. But he just needed, like, once he had that education, he realized I wasn't just being that weird about it. I was telling him the truth of these things are on high freaking alert. If you move and they can see you anywhere within their peripheral vision, they are going to pick you out. It's just, it's a totally different thing than, and when it's rut and they're on a doe, you have the ability to move around a lot more because they're occupied with themselves. But in that situation, when all three are coming and the lead one pegs you and then every other one's looking at you, like the word's out then. They all know there was something there. And
why were three of them hanging out together? Did they do
They
that?
were all on the doe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're just horny.
It'd be no different than
They had just taken their blue chew, 30 to 45 minutes. You can take it on a full stomach, Barklow, just in case.
Can I take it on an empty stomach?
Yeah, goddamn, I don't even know why I'm talking about it right now. But
yeah, this episode is brought to you by
It's
Kill
a totally
Cliff, by the
different
way.
animal,
Yeah.
though. Like, it's a totally different game. Like, I've been kind of sort of okay
Brought
with
to you by
whitetail,
Kill
but
Cliff.
the only way I'm successful with whitetail is to sit, and not big ones, but I literally just sit there stubbornly, sun up to sundown.
Yep.
Like,
I actually
just put
have,
my time in.
after I hunted with Dud, I went to Montana and got a whitetail my first day out, sitting by a tree.
Just sitting by a tree.
Zero experience, and I happened to look over, and I saw I had a huge open field in front of me, and I saw this thing moving off in the distance from right to left. I'm like, well, sitting's not going to work. And I had my earbud in because I was listening to Rogan and Jordan Peterson on a podcast. Kid you not. So I stand up, and I had my bow, and I nocked an arrow, and the thing just kept coming. So I had ranged all these bushes. I'm like, all right, 40. It kept coming, and it kept coming, and it kept coming. I'm like, okay. Put the head down, drew back. First day out whitetail hunting, whoop, whap, right on the spot.
You might as well quit right now.
Yeah.
Whitetails
good.
off the ground are tough,
Oh, yeah.
but he aced it.
But
I mean,
my success was sitting, like you said, 11-1. I think I killed 3 bucks in Missouri 3 years in a row, like between 11:45 and noon.
yep.
See,
Well,
to
I told
me,
her-
I would have thought, again, with low animal experience, what do you guys always call it? The golden hour, the witching hour, right before sunset, that hour before into daylight, and then daylight into evening. In the middle of the day, I thought they're sleeping all the time.
During the rut, it's a very good time because a lot of times they're very active throughout the night, and then in that little window of the golden hour, morning and evening, but then they'll bed down, and because it's breeding season, like it's pedal to the metal, so they literally lay down long enough to like catch their breath, rest a bit, and then there's a big midday movement. Normally, if you have a hot doe in the area, it's very hit or miss, and most people miss it. But I was telling someone the other day, I had success in Iowa. It was kind of an anomaly. Back in the day, somehow I drew 3 non-resident tags 3 years in a row. Don't ask me how. Happened. And I shot a buck at 11:11. Then the next year I shot one at 11:12. And then the third year it was like 11 o'clock, and I told my camera guy, I said, I'm going to stand up. And I stood up, and I said, I said, I've shot bucks the last 2 years at 11:11, 11:12. I said, I better. And 11:10, my phone rings, and it's Ulmer. And I see it's like ringing Randy Ulmer, and I thought, well, he wouldn't be calling me unless he really needed something. So I go, hey, what's up? And he said, are you in a tree? I go, yeah, it's November 12th. And he goes, oh, okay. He goes, well, are you seeing anything? I said, no, I'm not. I go, but, I told him the last 2 years I've saw something at 11:10, then 11:11. Or no, it was 11. I forgot what it was. 11:11, 11:10. And he's like, oh, really? And then all of a sudden I go, Buck, hold on. And I literally was talking to him, and I look up, and there's one just coming right to me. So he's like, as I'm pulling the phone down, it was like an old Motorola Flip, the real dinky one.
Did you have to bite the antenna and pull it out?
Yes, that's the one it was, the silver one.
That thing was money.
And I'm like, hold on. And I just literally, I'm already standing, so I just set it down on my tree stand seat, and I grab my bow, and this buck just comes in, and he's not that big, but I think because of the fact I knew Ulmer was on hold, and I just draw back, and the buck comes in, and he stops right at like 10 yards, and he's broadside, and then he just kind of turns and looks up to me and the camera guy, and I go, is he big enough? And the camera guy goes, for me. and I go, "Deer," and freaking smoked him. And then I picked the phone up, and I'm like, "Hey," and Randy's like, "Did you shoot?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got him." He's like, "Are you serious?" I go, "Yeah, he's down." He's like, "What?" I go, "Yeah, he's totally down. He rolled." And he goes, "Well, just call me back later." And I said, "All right, I'll call you back."
You have those experiences all the time, right, Barklow?
Yeah, not that experience, but
I'm checking on our food, so you guys
I'm in
tell
Missouri,
us.
right? At 10 days, and you want to hunt from dawn to dusk, and paying for this lease, and I had to do a call in the morning, and of course so I was like, guys, I can't go out in the morning. I was kind of mad. And then you do the call, and then it runs late, and then you drive out there. And I was just pissed now because I was hoping to be sitting by 10, and now it's like 10:30 and I'm walking in.
Oh, yeah, you're just rushing the clock. I hate that feeling.
And I'm just like pissed. I'm like, I'm wasting my time. Like, it's kind of like fishing where you can't see fish. Like, am I just like the dumbest person ever? And I climb up into the stand, I hook in, I pull my bow up, and it's just hanging there. No arrow on, don't have a release on yet, and I'm kind of sorting my stuff. And I hear something. I am facing the tree. I hear something behind me. And I grab my release, which is, a thumb trigger type release. I grab it in my hand, and I turn around, look over my shoulder, and here's a 10-point buck walking underneath, like coming towards me.
Yep.
And I literally grab the bow, I knock an arrow, and he walks by, and I have to wait he's directly under my stand as I'm like ready to shoot, too close. And I literally just wait for him to start walking away and shoot this thing. And it was the only whitetail hunt. I was in my stand maybe 10 minutes. And I text my buddy. I'm like, all right, I'm done. And he thinks I'm joking with him. I'm like, no, seriously, I've been in my stand for 10 minutes. I just shot a 10-point.
Good God.
But it doesn't work that way for me in whitetail. Like, I don't know about you, but some species like work.
For me, don't talk to me about hunting.
No, I know.
I've been
and
hunting
some
for exactly
species
11 months.
But like whitetails are tough. And I can sit there, like I will just gut it out day after day after day. But I don't know if I'm in the wrong spot or.
I got in a tree a couple times in Montana and had some does walk by. I've never had like the 10-point buck walk underneath. I'm waiting to have that experience.
Montana is a little different too. For whitetail interaction, it would probably be like me saying I had experience hunting elk in Tennessee or Wisconsin just opened a season, because they're just not pressured near as hard here in the western states as what they are in the Midwest. So it's kind of different. I'm
more likely to hit them with my car. Like, they're suicidal by where I live.
Yeah, it's a little different. Certain river bottom areas, like up on the Muscle Shell or up on the Milk, both of those areas is classic whitetail hunting, where you can hunt them the same as what you would throughout the Midwest and South and East. But up where you're at, where you have so much big timber too, it's kind of needle in a haystack stuff,
Well, yesterday,
it's a lot different.
Directly out my front door, there's a house being built in the neighborhood that we live in, and there were 2 does bedded in the dirt. Mm-hmm. Not that I would have ranged it, but from my son's room, it might have been 37 and a half. So, yeah, that was a needle in a haystack. It was a couple months too early. But, I'm actually more likely to hit him with my car than anything else where I live. It's been interesting. The only experience I have in a tree stand was with you in Georgia. I think I like being on the ground better.
Yeah.
Moving around.
That wasn't even – that was a – I would classify that as a royal cluster.
I'm just saying I was in a tree stand for a longer period of time than I've ever been in.
Is this Alabama?
It was Georgia.
Oh, Georgia.
That was the only time I've ever been in a tree stand.
No.
I did get a doe.
It's a totally different game.
Yeah. If you're hunting – if you came and hunted where you put in the time and effort for whitetails that people, out here out west, it's hard for me to write articles for Western style hunting. I always feel awkward doing it because I'm a Midwestern / Eastern / Southern person coming out west to enjoy out west. It's hard for me to write an article about Western hunting when there's guys that are out here that shed hunt, search maps, search high and low through the summer, camp out here, put cameras on water holes or wallows, and spend a ton of time behind the glass spotting, trying to pattern stuff, maybe even cut some trails in where they can to get to new areas. Whereas I'm that guy, I'm pretty much like you guys coming to the Midwest where you say, hey, I want to come hunt whitetails. I really enjoy hunting whitetails. It's fun. What's the best 7 days to come? And it's like, well, you're going to come November 1 to November 14. And that's when every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the world comes to the Midwest to hunt whitetails. And I'm Tom, Dick, and Harry coming out here, September 7th to the September 30th. I'm trying to chase elk in some state. It's the same. But for whitetails, if you really put together all the parts of hunting a whitetail, where you're putting in the food plots, you're
you do at your farm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or all the states that I hunt, where I'm, literally have cameras out. I'm taking a weekend that I have off to drive there to pull cards, to check those cards. And if I'm not seeing the traffic there that I need to, moving those to a new area, trying to relocate stands, or going there during the late season just so that I can look at put my drone up in the air, run it over snow to where I can see what travel paths are from the sky, to where it's like, wait a minute.
How money is that drone?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, to be able to look at things of, wait a minute, okay, now I see where the congestion is, like where these pinch points are, and then it is really tactical. At that point, it's almost sniper-like. Would you agree? I mean,
No,
I've never
I would.
been to sniper school.
Well,
but
that's what I've learned, though, from guys like you, right, and some other folks I know, like in Ohio and stuff, that's what they do. They hunt whitetail. How calculated and surgical it is. Like, my buddy Donnie, I forget, he shot like 2 or 3 deer last year, and I think the cumulative amount of time he actually sat in the tree stand was 6 hours, right? Where I'm literally going to Missouri on a lease, and I'm like, I got these 10 days, and I'm going to sit there sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
And he's like, I will not go in there until I have a really good chance of killing that buck the first set.
I'm the same.
And it shocks me. I'm like,
There's a guy,
well, no wonder you enjoy yourself.
There's a guy who lives here in Bozeman. I have never met the dude. He hit me up after the last time I was with Joe on his podcast. His name's Sean Melland.
Okay.
He's been sending me pictures of bull elk for months.
If you give away a spot, you are not going there.
No. I'll just say it's in Montana. So, but he has been glassing, patterning, research, and he drops monster bull elk every year. Public land. He drew the 900 Tech 20, right, as the tag we drew.
I think that's what I drew.
Yeah, I think it's a very general tag, and I was actually texting with him, going over what to put in for it. It was the same one that covers the ranch that we'll be going to, but you want to talk about a guy who's passionate, and he's not guessing. The point I'm getting to is he's not guessing when he goes out there. He's like, from just listening to him talk, he's like, yeah, this is the bull that I'm going after. It's not, hey, I'm going to walk around until I see a bull.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this one that has a little bit of an atypical whatever it is, I'm going to hammer this guy because I've been watching him for 3 years.
Yep.
That
is
that's the sniper school now. Like, that guy is taking it much more seriously than the guy who gets an airplane ticket for 7 days.
See, the places that I hunt collectively, to some people it would seem big, especially to Western hunters. It wouldn't seem like that much ground, but I have, I think, 3 different places that I can hunt, and over those 3 places, probably a cumulative maybe 600 acres total. And over that 600 acres, I have probably 30 to 40 sets, and I can count on one hand the amount of times I'll sit the same set twice in a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And normally I'm literally watching the weather thinking, okay, it's pre-rut. I know that buck is in this area. This is the plot where the majority of the does are. Tonight's the night I have the wind and I go in. The amount of times where I've literally killed the buck that I want within the first day of me hunting is pretty high.
I was watching you last year on your Instagram story, like payload or whatever the
Yeah,
bucks you were naming, and it's like, oh, hold on, there he is.
Yeah. Well, and payload was my number one, and when I encountered him the first time, it was exactly where I thought that I would, but I didn't get the shot. He was on a doe. And because I hunted that place, I moved 1.5 miles away to a completely different farm that I just had permission to hunt. It wasn't even my place. And I just went there because I knew there was a high concentration of does, and I knew the wind was really good for me to get in and out without anything knowing I was there or seeing me. And that just happened to be where he was. You know, it was there was actually I think there was a few days break because Ben came in.
Yep.
And I just, after I missed that opportunity, I thought, well, I'm not going to see him again right now, just because I knew, looking at the forecast, the wind wasn't going to be favorable, and because I had seen him on a food plot, once it hits peak rut, bucks aren't going to be in a food plot. They're going to be in cover. They're going to be in, they're going to be in bedding areas or areas where the does are able to get away from those bucks. So I just knew I wasn't going to see him there anymore. And then Ben flew in, so we were almost 1 mile a different direction when Ben shot his buck, and then when he shot his buck, we took care of it. We cooked it for a Yeti story, and then that next morning I said, are you going to fly out early? He said, I'd really like to film you for a day. So he said, where are we going to go? And I told him, I don't know. We'll have to look in the morning. So in the morning we got up, went and kind of got all of our gear situated, and then I pretty much looked at the hourly forecast of what the wind was going to do every single hour, and I said, okay, based on these swings, I've got to go here. And we went there, and then sure enough, here comes a doe and payload's on her, and and I shot, and he's like, man, I shouldn't have shot the first one. I'm like, dude, you can't think that way. This buck was 1.5 miles away 2 days ago, but I just knew that location was going to play in our odds of where everything was in our favor for entry, exit without burning other spots for the next days to come. Because
you talk a lot about that on your Insta
you have
story
to remember,
too. Yeah.
Your hunting window for primetime whitetails is 20 days. That's prime time. If you burn spots by passing them, then those spots you can check those off your map. If you're burning them, moving past them during daylight, or if you have to come out at dark and you're passing 2 food plots, they're going to be loaded with deer. I've always said that each time you hunt a spot, you can count on seeing half of what you saw the time before that. So a lot of times, if you set a new stand after you've hunted it 3 days, say you saw 30 on the first day, you see 15 the second, then you're down to 6. It just cuts in half.
Yeah.
So every time you cut a spot in half by moving past it, even though you weren't there sitting on it, a lot of times sitting on it isn't what burns it. It's when you have to exit, when you have to come in, or when one looks at you or one circles the food plot downwind and then gets your scent and then snorts and then everything else clears out. Then you've burned it. And some of the things just say, well, it could have been a coyote, it could have been whatever, I'm going to go back. But I think the really mature ones, they're just like, you know what? There's other fish in the sea. I've got more places to eat. I don't have to eat there every night. I'm going to go over here. What's the risk? I've been there 25 times this year, and I've never experienced anything where I had to put my tail up. So I'm just going to go over there, and I'll come back here in a few weeks. That's kind of what they do, I think.
And
the
that's
smart
what it
ones.
seems like the whitetail hunters do is they might not sit in the stand very long, but there are months and months of preparation leading up to that where they can go, I'm going to make an educated guess and go there tonight. And it's like, yeah, you sat there for 2 hours, but actually you put,
it's hundreds of hours for 1 minute.
Maybe even an entire year
It's
into
unseen,
prepping that scenario.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive to think about all the time that you guys, like the surgical nature, I would say, that you go in looking for an animal that you would put a name to, and like, oh, here we are.
Obviously, there's a pattern to that.
Yes. Which requires time and
goes
effort.
into your field, correct? It would be easy to say, okay, here's our target. We know they've been here a few times, and we could go there, and if we're there for 2 weeks, we're going to see them.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. if we're there 2 weeks, someone's going to know that we were there.
Yeah.
So how do we go there the one time when the odds are literally stacked completely in our favor, and if it doesn't work out, we probably know we can't go back. What's the next target point?
Yeah.
That's how you have to approach it. Otherwise, you're not going to kill something that lives 9 years defending its life, and is, you know, they literally live 9 years. They're as smart as they come.
Yeah.
And people are trying to kill them all the time, and nature's trying to do it as well. They just, I feel like because they live a tenth of our life, they educate a tenth faster.
Or 10x faster, you mean?
Yeah. I think 10x faster.
So is there a time of the season that has been more productive for you? Like, because the biggest deer, whitetail anyways, that I've ever seen right on the hoof, you know, came by me at 30 yards trailing a doe, and at a certain point I just ended up yelling at the thing trying to get it to stop, and it never did know I was there. No, it never did.
What did you yell?
I finally just said, "Hey!" You know, you do the erp,
Awesome.
erp, and then elevate, and then you're just like, "Hey!" I think I actually said, "Hey, fucker," because I'm at full draw. And
How fast was he moving?
He was just trailing, but he was not slowing down.
No.
He was not slowing down. And
They
so,
turn
like,
off all senses when they're on a doe. It's like
it's amazing.
Tractor beam.
it's like
I've had
when,
Bear do that too.
It's like
but
when you have a buddy that has just a real bitch as a girlfriend, and you're like, dude, this chick is a bitch, and he's just like,
No
what?
way, dude.
What? I'm going out tonight, and you're like, did you see she was totally chatting up that other guy last night? And he's just like, I'm going out tonight. Dude, she rode 4 of our friends last week. I'm going out tonight. That's what it's like.
because you want to be the fifth.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we might have gone off the rails here. All right, so Survival 101.
Oh, God. I'm going to go look at the...
All right, Barklow, this one's
We're
directly for
cooking
you.
elk brats and burgers while we're podcasting.
And
so.
here's the deal. Barklow loves a brat.
Yep.
I do.
I'll post. Actually, you know what? That picture's going up
No.
for this podcast.
It's not.
So here's the first question.
Make
This is
it
for
a
you.
Barklow one.
It
though.
is.
Okay, perfect.
I just listened to your first episode with Barklow for the 3rd time. He's obviously a fan.
Okay, no
Barklow.
pressure. Yep.
And I had a technical question I was hoping you could either get a direct answer for or include in a future podcast with him. I'm an avid outdoors enthusiast, mostly in the endurance space, and would love recommendation on John's preferred UL synthetic sleep system. I have been using UL down bags for a number of years, and there's such a plethora of gear, not all good, obviously, that when it comes to synthetic sleeping bags, I go a little cross-eyed.
Yeah. So.
And this is a good one because a lot of people focus on the camo, and if you're going to do an extended hunt, there's some things you should think about. Shelter being one of them. We can maybe tackle that later, but this is what you'd be sleeping in inside of your shelter. I think we touched a little bit on sleeping bags
Maybe.
in
yeah.
Lanai.
It's hard to remember that, Andy.
This is true. But take it away because this is your wheelhouse for sure. I know you think about this stuff often.
Yeah, I do. So, you know, I'm on record as talking a lot of good about synthetics.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like to say, though, is that I'm not anti-down. I'm just pro-synthetic, right? So there's a difference kind of in mind space, the way you look at that. But the thing I like about synthetics is they dry really quick.
Yep.
And which I think is part of people's problem with synthetics, is that they do dry quick, especially with a base layer, that you almost feel like heat's being pulled away from your body, which in some regard, it might be, but it's such
in the drying process.
Yeah, but it's such a short period of time that, 5, 10, 15 minutes depending, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you wear wool, and wool's a great product. Really, synthetic is all it's trying to do in a lot of regard is trying to mimic wool, but wool stays wet longer.
Yep.
And so, you've been there, you kind of get that kind of steamy, clammy feeling. But in that process, you're relatively warm, right? So wool dries, takes longer to dry, but it
just feels
keeps,
damp forever.
Right, but it keeps some heat retaining properties, where synthetic dries very quick,
Mm-hmm.
which is really what I'm after. And so I think if you know how to layer. So when you start talking about sleeping bags, and I'm a big proponent of sleeping in my clothing, so I've invested all this time and money in building a clothing system. Why would I want to take it off and sleep in my underwear at night? So the old wives' tale is, well, you're warmer if you sleep, in your sleeping bag in your underwear. Well, that's not true. I mean,
It is true if you're with another man.
Well, that aside, or if you're under a quilt.
Okay.
But especially if you have any kind of moisture in your system, get in a sleeping bag and dry it out. And so when you wake up in the morning, just for ease of sake, for management, I already have my clothes on. I can get up, I can go take a whiz in the middle of the night, or I can get up and go hunt, whatever. If I'm wet, every layer I have is already dry, but you have to consider the sleeping bag you get in. So if you get in a traditional down bag, as that moisture moves through the system, it's going to begin to clump those down feathers, right?
Yeah.
You, as a human being, just when you're sleeping, you put off moisture. So that moisture is going to be in the bag no matter what. Then you put any moisture in the system, there's more moisture. If you go with
and for people who don't understand why there is condensation inside of their tent when they wake up in the morning.
So that is the physical manifestation of that moisture from you.
Yeah, coming out through your pores and then the aspiration
and
all
your
that.
clothing.
Yep.
Which really at that point you need to ventilate your sleeping bag or tent better. The treated downs are good. The problem with treated downs is it almost lures people into a false sense of security. So what they do is they take the feathers and they treat them kind of with a water repellent treatment. The problem with that is that, and I've, me personally and in my former career, I did extensive testing in that, at a certain point those down feathers will be overtaken by moisture. But more importantly, they always show a cup of water, and then the feathers float on top of the water, and then they shake it, and they're like, look, it's still waterproof. The problem with the actual real application of that is if I have a sleeping bag with treated down and I get in and I'm damp, anywhere there's a compression area. So if I put an elbow down, if I lay on my back,
Yep.
if there's enough moisture, those feathers will become compromised.
Which is going to be half of your bag because it's impossible to lay in a bag without a compression area.
Correct. With compression, it's been my experience that once those treated down feathers are wet, it takes just as long to dry as a traditional down bag. So, maybe I'm a bit of a simpleton, but I want to go into the mountains with a system that's as durable as possible. I want to make myself as durable as possible. I want to make my system, whatever that is, as durable as possible. So I think you can get a synthetic bag where I sleep in my clothes. Because I'm sleeping in my clothes and I understand that, I can choose a bag that's lighter. Mm-hmm. So I can get away with a 30-degree bag, for instance, wearing my clothes in 0-degree weather.
So I was going to ask you that when we get to the end of this. Not necessarily a brand, just so you don't have to nail anything down. But if you personally were to design a bag that would have the largest sweet spot, what temperature rating would you design it for?
So I've been able to wear or use, I guess I should say, my favorite is a 30-degree bag, mm-hmm. but there's a lot to that, right? So it's my body mass, it's my how good a shape I'm in, it's my diet, it's what I'm eating, it's how hydrated I'm in. So there's a lot of physiology involved. But I would say somewhere between a 20 and 30-degree bag, if you utilize your clothing system and you have a good ground pad, so the ground pad cannot be overstated. You can't just lay the sleeping bag down on the ground and expect it to do something.
Well, you can. You can expect it to suck.
It's going to suck. There's no doubt.
Well, explain the role of the ground pad to me. Not to cut you off, but so explain two things. Explain the role of the ground pad and then also the rating system on a sleeping bag. When you say a 30-degree bag, what does that mean? Start there and then explain the role of the ground pad.
Yeah, so sleeping bags are rated, any good sleeping bag is there's a European standard. It's called the EN standard. I think it's called the ISO standard now. But basically, they put a mannequin in the bag, a copper mannequin in the bag, and it's got sensors, and they come up with this rating. And it's like there's and I'll probably get this wrong, but there's 3 ratings. There's the rating where you're going to live, but you're probably going to wish you didn't. there's the rating where, you're going to be so warm that, the average human of whatever body fat's going to be like super warm, and then there's kind of the middle. So I think that's called the comfort rating, and I should know these better, but there's 3 ratings, and so generally speaking, most people default to the middle rating, the comfort rating.
Yep.
So that's like an average human being, and it's not as big as me, right? So 5'9" or 5'10", whatever, with average body mass, can lay in this bag with no clothes on and be comfortable at 30 degrees. But none of us want to be average, and
comfortable at 30 degrees, you mean outside temperature?
Correct, ambient.
Yep.
So if you go inside if you put yourself inside a tent, it's going to be warmer in the tent than it is outside, right?
Hopefully.
And it could be anywhere on average from 5 to 10 degrees difference. So that immediately bumps that sleeping bag up to a warmer rating.
Yep.
Now you sleep in your clothes. That bumps it up to yet a warmer rating. Then if you're well hydrated, at least for the backcountry, and eat a decent meal with enough protein and fat so your metabolism's burning all night, that bumps it up yet again. And I've been able to, and I don't necessarily, I don't want to condone this without the proper training, but I was able to work for the last 10 years of my life in any mountain range I went to in the middle of winter with a 30-degree sleeping bag. And I never felt that my sleep was compromised or that I was in fear of my life. But I also knew what I was doing.
You were managing all those other things you talked about.
So it's a system. You cannot look at any single component in isolation. Everything must be looked at as a complete system, working in some kind of synchronicity to produce this end result. And so what people do is they're like, oh, I love this bag because it's down and it's super lightweight and compressible, and I love this jacket, and I love this ground pad. It's like, yes, but at some point they have to come together and work as a system. And if the first time you're doing that is, say, a hunt on Kodiak in March, like, you may be really, really disappointed with the results, right?
And you may blame it on the gear.
You may begin to blame it then on any single component, my tent, my sleeping bag, my ground pad. What the ground pad does, to get back to your point, is you need to insulate yourself from the ground to prevent conductive heat loss. So your body's 98.6, the ground is not. So the ground is going to immediately start to suck heat away from your body.
It's like a magnet.
Into the ground. It's like a magnet, right? It wants to seek some kind of stasis. So you need to insulate yourself from the ground. So you can do that with either a closed cell foam pad, right, which is good, and they're lightweight and they're durable, and there's lots of good things about that. But the R value, and I couldn't quote them off the top of my head, is okay. Or you can go with an inflatable ground pad, so that's the one you inflate with your breath or some kind of bag, and you can put an inch plus of air in. So this dead air is a great insulator. It gets you off the ground, and so in the middle of winter, I use a slightly different ground pad than I do in summer, right? So if we're going to go on this elk hunt, I may run a 1/2 to 3/4 inch. If I'm going out in the middle of winter, I may run inch and a half ground pad. But that, it all has to be factored in.
And I think an important point is there,
unison.
Regardless of summer or winter, you're still putting something in between you and the ground to manage that.
You can never sit your ass on the ground. So if you're in a survival situation and you don't have a ground pad and you're going to sit down and ride a night out sitting around the fire, if you're not sitting on pine boughs or vegetation or something to get your butt off the ground, the earth is literally going to be sucking the heat out of your ass. Like, it's critical. Like, I think if I had to lay there in my clothes and lay on the ground, or lay on the ground in a lightweight sleeping bag without a ground pad, or lay on the ground pad in my clothes without a sleeping bag, I would rather lay on the ground pad and my clothes on the ground, because I've just learned if I can get out of the wind, like, that is going to be a better indicator of keeping me warm than just trying to wrap yourself up in this blanket, right? So I don't know. There's a lot to it, and honestly, you could do quite frankly, you could do an hour podcast just on that question.
You could do 3 hours on a sleeping bag.
But so when it comes, and I also don't think that any one sleeping bag is like, I don't own one sleeping bag. I mean, right there in the corner's 3, right? And I got plenty more. But, you kind of have to pick the right tool for the job.
Yep.
But I also have enough experience that I've come to kind of settle on certain things. And synthetic sleeping bags, to me, kind of make the most sense for most of the time. If you and I are going to go climb Everest, yeah, we'll probably wear down, right? And we'll probably bring down. But completely different environment. Completely different.
And fortunately, we're not going to do that.
We're not going to do that, I hope. Yeah.
As an aside, I actually had in my will when I was active duty that if I got killed, I wanted 5 people to summit Everest without oxygen with my ashes in the hopes that they would all die, just to be an asshole. And I kid you not, I actually hand wrote that.
Oh no, I don't doubt that actually. Yeah.
All right.
I have something written for my death, but
yeah,
you'll both of you probably be involved with it.
Yeah.
But
Your death or the actual celebration thereafter?
I'll be gone before both of you. Don't sweat it. So
okay.
You guys can deal with that. All right. This one is for Dudley. Even though I've answered this question before, but
I guys need to try that while I'm answering this.
I will. Dudley, while Barklow was discussing at a very deep level his knowledge of sleeping bags, Dudley was cooking, it looks like sausage and hamburgers.
It's elk.
So
elk brats and elk hamburger.
So I've answered this one from a rifle perspective, from a perspective of long-range marksmanship, but I think this comes from an archer, so I'd rather have you answer it. It says, I have a question, but small background. I just picked up archery in some part due to you as well as other sources. I do shoot guns, and from my mental aspect, I try to be very mindful of pulling the trigger as to point of not being surprised by it, which I have an issue with that over distance. So from your sniper training, I think you do the same. Incorrect. Surprise break is incredibly important. The question is, do you carry that to your bow? I have seen John Dudley and a few others say that you want to be surprised, but I'm finding that hard to overcome. If you have time, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks again.
Yeah, that's the same as Barklow with the sleeping bag. This could almost be a podcast. Yeah. I was actually really enjoying the fact that I got to work with you and Trevor Thompson, mutual friend, who we were at during that time. We were all able to start to make some correlation between, and if he's been a podcast listener, he probably heard some of that, which is good. But there's a lot of people that want to know when the shot is happening. With archery, I feel like that anticipation isn't good.
Which is the same with the rifle, which is why I said I don't try to say and now, because then you get people who are flinching or anticipating or tightening up. And I don't know, maybe if you're at the highest level, you're going to know every time, but I was taught to slowly and smoothly apply the pressure. It's not like, oh my God, it went off.
Yeah.
I know when it's about to go off, kind of.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to anticipate that break.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're involving, this is one of the things that's tough for people with archery is the first thing they're given by most archery shops is a wrist strap release. Yep. That has, that's activated from your index finger. And the thing is, your index finger is probably the most sensitive phalange you have. It's arguably the most sensitive thing you have to actual touch and understanding of pressure and travel and movement, because your fingers do a lot more things than other parts of your body that are sensitive. I mean, obviously you pinch someone in the back of the tricep, it hurts, but your tricep probably doesn't understand, pressure and things like that. Whereas the finger really, especially the index finger, really knows tenths of a pound, fractions of a pound as it builds. And yeah, when I'm shooting a rifle, especially with a 2-stage trigger, I know when I've cleared stage 1, anything after that,
it's party time.
It's party time, right? So the main thing is letting that float happen without trying to clinch other muscles that are going to cause you to veer off target as you compress the trigger for that final piece. With archery, what you have to realize is an arrow clearing the power stroke of a bow is not happening at 2,200 feet per second.
Yeah.
I mean, it is happening at 300 feet per second or less. So, I mean, you could imagine you know, trying to, if you have a spitball gun and you're, you know, and you're trying to like flinch and do that thing, it takes so long for that to clear that straw. And that's what's happening with archery. When you anticipate or you flinch, or if you're thinking that you're going to move past the target and make it happen at the same time, it's not literally coming out of the barrel and breaking the sound barrier and hitting the target. It is a casting object. It's like throwing a rock. I mean, if someone was running by you and you had your arm cocked back and they ran straight past the front of you and then you threw the rock, you're going to miss them. And that's like a very slowed down version of what's happening when people try to anticipate the trigger with archery equipment. And there was recently a really big professional tournament where one of the people that were leading it was obviously, from some of the video that I was watching, he was anticipating his trigger and making it happen. He had an amazing first several targets in the first few days, but then all of a sudden, everything catches up to him and the wheels come off. And that's what and the problem is the wheels come off when you're anticipating stuff. It means that you're not able to control a certain stress factor.
Yeah.
And when that stress factor gets elevated, then obviously your ability to control that is going to be elevated at the same time, and it's not a good combination to be in. What you need to do is you have to be willing to let that part go and try to get that surprise shot, to where that fine line of, I don't really like that feeling, or I'm not really good at doing it that way, and I can do it better this way. When I'm doing it right, I can do it better this way. You're right. If I punch the trigger, I can tell you right now, I could light some people's ass up for a day. And then...
Well, and up close, too.
Yeah. I mean, if I want to go out and punch the trigger for a day, good luck, everybody. But if anyone's smart, come back in a week, because I'm going to be, watching YouTube videos on how to get rid of the shanks. Because that's what's going to happen. It'll happen to anybody.
So you know how we used to catch that with rifles, and it's invisible because a lot of people will focus just on the end result. All you have to do to catch somebody with a rifle or a pistol is to throw a dummy round in their magazine, and you don't tell them. And this is what I remember to this day, probably 2 decades ago, 2.5, I was teaching my sister how to shoot a pistol. And she didn't know anything about it, so I sent the slide forward first, and I put the magazine in. She thinks it's hot. I know damn well when she pulls the trigger, nothing's going to happen. So she presents the way that I told her to. She's balanced, she's braced, she's going out, she's got about an 80-20 left-hand grip, right-hand grip, and she would have shot the table in front of her. Now, if a round had gone off when she pulled the trigger, I probably would have seen some of it because it was so gross, but a lot of it would have been hidden by the recoil.
Yep.
And it exposes instantaneously the fundamentals. And I used to do it all the time. Like, believe me, I've punched some triggers with the trigger on a rifle. Man, I've thrown some dummy rounds in. It's like, wow, I'm glad I didn't just shoot the ground 3 feet in front of me, because and if you don't focus on those things, because the target was 7 feet in front of me. Yep. I could close my eyes and hit the target. I could put it between my legs and hit it. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
But if you put that at 300 yards or 1,500 yards, and you pull that same bullshit.
Or slow the bullet down.
Yeah.
Are you less accurate when you shoot subsonic?
I wouldn't say that you're...
Are your mistakes magnified if you're subsonic?
I would say that the round has more time to be impacted by the environment. If you have good fundamentals,
so
supersonic,
in a way it's similar, I guess.
Yeah, supersonic versus subsonic, if you have the same fundamentals, and let's say you have a smooth, everything, your shooting fundamentals are good, I'd say you have a clean break of the trigger, I'd say the only thing that's going to get you is the time in flight.
But say you're flinching.
Oh, it's going to be worse. Subsonic.
So that's the same thing. So, subsonic to supersonic that's a pretty small window. But the window between subsonic to archery is like freaking jumping your Millennium Falcon into freaking hyperspace versus just cruising around with the other things. Yeah.
Speed of sound is still pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. I think people have to overcome that, and all of us sitting here all shoot a release that I'm an advocate of. We keep hearing it over and over and over again, called the Silverback. And I'm not going to lie, It'd be a lot like taking a person that has extreme target panic with a pistol and all they're doing is shooting dummy rounds or shooting a trigger that the only way it will fire is if they slowly squeeze it and then it will fire. Like if you made a pistol trigger or a rifle trigger that was like that, imagine how many elite level military snipers you would all of a sudden say, holy shit, this guy can't even get this trigger to go off because he's wanting to brace and he's wanting to hit that trigger. This identifies those problems. And when I've had a lot of people that buy it, and at first they'll send a thing saying it's not working right, and then it's hard because there's so many going out that I need to clone myself just to talk to everyone that buys a silverback because the people that I can reach out to and say, okay, hey, let me look at a few things. And I have a program on my phone called Dartfish. So I'll actually download videos of people and then run it through this program called Dartfish where it slows things down a lot for me. And then I can actually see these instantaneous fragments of a second where I can understand that they're anticipating the shot and they're convinced I am not. And it's like, okay, you see this second right here where you're like going forward, coming back, your eyes are squeezing tight.
I was going to say the eyes closed is a classic one with the gun. They're just like, I saw it go off. And then you take the picture. Like, you didn't see shit.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same. But, hey, we've all been there. The main thing is I'm not the right person to ask the correlation between the two, which is why I really want to get training from Trevor on the tactical side. I think even though I'm not a gun guy, but I think that would help me.
Yeah, well,
it would help me bridge.
It's the same thing. So when I answer this guy's question, I tried to explain it's not surprise like, oh wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. It's slowly and controlled. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I'm in control of when it goes off. Like today when we're sitting down here shooting, one thing I think people watching you shoot, they think that your pin is probably rock solid steady, exactly where your arrow is going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you right now, from my perspective, that's not what my sight picture looks
like.
Yeah,
not mine either.
It's maybe it's on the target, maybe it's not. But once I commit to slowly pulling through that, all I'm thinking about is pulling, and I look through the pin and try to look at where I want it to hit to let the subconscious take over, which I'm stealing from you. But it's not. If you get into the habit of it looks great right now, if you think that with a rifle, you're screwed. It looks good right now. If you're telling yourself that in your head, you're setting yourself up for failure later in whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, there's times where it certainly looks like I have a I guess a margin. I have a tolerance level. There's times where it's like, okay, it looks okay. It doesn't look great. Or, okay, this is not good. When there's times where my pin isn't even on the target, I need to let off the gas because this is just like this. If the wind's completely blown me off the target, this is not going to go the direction I want at all. So there is a fine line, but there's also within that kill zone, if I'm floating around within that whole kill zone, and a lot of times, like, it's all proportional. So if I'm shooting an indoor round, which the indoor round, the X-ring, which I'm trying to hit is about the size of a dime or a little smaller. But then there's a 10 ring around the X, which is about the size of a quarter. So if I'm floating within that quarter, I'm happy with knowing I'm going to hit the X. And then obviously when I go back to 100 yards, if I'm floating within that entire gold or some red, then I'm okay with that. Now, if I'm hitting blue and black, obviously it's like I need to get myself back in the middle, and if there's elements like wind forcing me off, I have to get myself back on. But you have to get to the point where you're okay with that. And once you're okay with that, you're making a big step as an archer. There's two different levels.
Or a shooter in general, too, rifle, pistol.
Yeah. There's one step where you're just okay with knowing your pin's going off and pulling through. And a lot of people, that'll still happen, but you'll also see them still blink after. Like the release will break, and then they'll blink. But it's an after reaction. But then once you get beyond that, of like really getting to the point where it's like, I'm totally okay with, it's probably like people having a gun go off around them. Once you've heard it enough times, you don't start blinking every time you hear it go off. And it's the same thing. There's a small window of people start to let their shot break and then they're blinking, and then they get to the point where it's breaking and they're not feeling that reaction. So I think he just needs to stick with it and don't use the crutch. A lot of people want to use what they were taught tactically, especially people that were tactical prior moving into the archery world. They want to use that as a crutch. Don't use it as a crutch. I don't know if it's 100% the way. I mean, you're saying it's not how you're trained. I wouldn't know. I just know don't use this as a crutch. I'm just telling you, if I have 10 guys and I teach and 9 of them tackle the way that I'm saying, those 9 are going to be good. The one guy that wants to stick, there might be one guy every now and then that can stick to his method and he just does good that way because he always has.
Yep.
But that's the anomaly, and I always say I try to play the odds.
Yeah, you might want to play towards the norm.
Yeah, I don't want to be the anomaly. I want to be in the favor of, the majority of the people that just need what's best for the masses. That's where I fall in. I really feel like I'm average. I mean, I feel like I'm an average guy that strives to work towards the average way of being the best. I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but I'm an average person that just I want to perfect the average way of doing it, and I think it works for the majority of people, and it's worked for me. That's what I think.
Got anything to add, John Barklow?
JB?
No.
What'd you like best? Did you like of course, the brat.
Yeah.
Dude, you wore that brat out.
I don't even know if he chewed, but
your wife took half your elk burger.
No, that's awesome.
All right, here's a good one for both of you.
Uh-oh.
What resources could I read/study that both of you, Johns, might recommend? What would be in his first aid kit? How much is too much? And I like this part of the question.
Ooh, God.
At what juncture would you or John hit the oh shit button on your inReach instead of dealing it with yourself? So here's a question.
God. That was 14 questions.
Well, let's go backwards. So the inReach, and it is 2018. There's a bunch of devices you can hook up to your cell phone that have satellite connectivity. Do you roll Barklow in the field with an inReach?
I have not in the past.
All right, that's all you get to answer.
And this year, but I put my wife through too much stuff, and so this year I am. Yep.
Okay.
But I've had satellite phones in the past.
Yep. How about you, Dud? Do you ever roll with non-cell phone coverage type stuff, satellite?
Well, this is kind of a loaded question, because when you have family and when you have a wife at home and when a lot of the world knows when you aren't there, that's a whole different subject.
For sure.
So, I normally travel everywhere with the sat phone. Do I pick it up and call on it all the time? I don't.
Yep.
And actually Barklow and I both need to be spanked, because this past year when we went to BC, I mean, a lot of people followed the story. It was a very fun hunt and a cool hunt, and which is what all of us, I mean, the 3 of us and Trevor included, we're all after an adventure each time, and we like to kind of push that envelope. But we're all under the understanding that there was Wi-Fi in camp, like an actual satellite up on a big pole to where it could reach out. So I didn't bring my sat phone, and John didn't either. And we literally got there and lightning had hit the damn pole and the freaking Wi-Fi was down. So, I mean, I think I had to go like 20 or 30K?
Yeah, it wasn't
just to find a 10-foot radius that gave a signal. So it was one of those things where you were trying to reach out. I've never had to reach out like on a true oh shit button. Yeah. My reach out has always been for family situations.
But both of you guys would advocate having the ability to reach out at any time.
100%.
Okay. Yeah,
here's the other thing too. This is actually very, very important for whitetail hunters, because I really think that whitetail hunting is actually more dangerous than Western hunting, because the amount of people that are injured falling from a tree stand far surpass the amount of people that I know that get attacked by a wolf or attacked by a grizzly bear. So here's my protocol. I actually have a map of the farms that I have. Each of my stands are numbered. So when I go to a stand, my game warden and my wife are on a group text, and they both get text. I'm at 37. And for me, I actually, this is another kind of a weird subject for some people, the game warden thing. I've just got to the point where, yeah, the first few times you tell your game warden where you're going to be, he's probably going to be there. But, 6 years later, he's like, okay, I have other bigger fish to fry. I personally, especially with what I do, I feel like that plays into my favor. One, for safety. Two, for the fact of just because of what I do, it's so easy for people to say, oh, well, you did it. He didn't do it legally, or, that deer was 5 miles this way. The buck that I shot, people could have easily said, that buck was on my property 3 miles over here. If I'm never covering anything up, one, I don't have anything to hide, which I think is good on a different level. But on the same thing, I have a podcast that if you haven't listened to the podcast that I did with my Uncle Kenny, which I don't know the number, I can look it up. You need to listen to that podcast, because even though it wasn't a hunting fall from a tree, it was an instance where he got seriously injured
on a tractor.
And no one knew where he was, and he almost died because of that. Whereas, so Sharon has fallen from a tree. She fell one time in Alberta. She fell 20 foot onto her back.
Damn.
And luckily, we were in a pine tree, and the hole underneath the pine tree was all pine needles, and it was raining. It had rained for days. So when she hit, I think because she's light, nothing happened. But it was literally, I went up the tree first, got in, hooked a tether on the tree stand, was sitting there with the carabiner in my hand, and I told her to climb up, hold on tight. She literally got to the last peg, and I grabbed her safety, the extension.
The rope, yep.
Yeah, I grabbed the line off the top of her harness, and I turned away from her, and I grabbed the carabiner, and I was literally moving to clip the two on, and then her safety belt just pulled right out of my hand, and I look, and here's my wife just falling, and it is the worst feeling.
For sure, helpless.
Because I thought, here's my wife's going to be crippled, and I was literally holding on to her line. It's like, and luckily she was okay. And then fast forward a year later, I had a tree peg break on me when I was transitioning from my from my peg onto my stand, and I literally had my carabiner and was trying to clip them, and it broke, and I fell about 20 feet onto my back. And when I did that, it was the first day I'd ever taken a heater bodysuit out with me, and I had it bungeed to the back of my backpack. And when I landed on that heater bodysuit that's equivalent to a big ass sleeping bag. So I just literally racked my back, and I ended up rupturing one of my kidneys. I had a renal infarct in my kidney. I went in the hospital for 7 days. It was like $50,000. One of my kidneys doesn't work, by the way, and it was a bad deal. So yeah, those protocols for texting my game warden and Sharon, because the reality is your wife needs to know where you are. The other reality is she's probably not going to know how to go to that spot. Your game warden's going to know how to go to that spot. So, and if it's not your game warden, it should be your best buddy. If the three of us lived here and we were all elk hunters, sure, I would just be like, guys, I'm going to the Spanish Peaks tonight. I'm going to be in this basin. Mm-hmm. And you have to, because if you don't show up, that's a better oh shit button than you having a satellite phone. Because the problem is if you fall and you're unconscious, or, and I've found this a lot as well, as a fireman, people that get in like vehicle accidents, they can't get to their cell phone because they don't know where the hell it is.
Yeah.
When your cell phone's
might be ejected out of the
car.
car.
When your cell phone's in your cup holder and you go rolling down the road 10 times up and over, ass over tea kettle, you can't grab your cell phone to call. If you're down in a ditch, that's how a lot of the people that end up dying is because no one knows they're down there. It's the same thing. The oh shit button for hunting is letting people know where you are. That's the number one.
I would add to that a drop dead time. If you don't hear from me by, something's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know any of that. But, to go back to the first aid kit.
Well, hold on. We're going to work our way backwards.
Well,
if you did have a drop dead button and you were in the backcountry, like let's say you're back in Kodiak, what did you teach the guys for reaching out to the next higher level of care? When was the criteria to hit, I need help?
Yeah, so that goes back to what your training is and what you carry into the field, right? So,
God damn you, just talk about the first aid kit.
Oh, thank you. I know how to segue. But, having been through, wilderness EMT and, combat casualty care that we got in the military and all that, like you can...
The worst guy to ask a shortcut.
You have those skills, though. You have those skills, but the reality is, even with our great corpsmen, like what are they going to do? They're going to stabilize and call for a medevac, right? That's what you do. You're not going to try to suture somebody in the field. You're not going to try to intubate somebody or give them a crike. If I was gun hunting, which I don't do anymore, I might carry a tourniquet. But the reality is, I know what a tourniquet does. Mm-hmm. I know how it works. I can improvise a tourniquet from almost anything. And so to not carry too much stuff and kind of the what if, and you could what if it and worry yourself to death, and at that point maybe you shouldn't go anywhere. But I carry the basics, and then at a certain point I need to be able, right, the SOS button, the sat phone, I need to be able to know who to call. So for instance, if I call, Julie, and I'm like, hey, like when we were in Kodiak, I'm like, hey, spin the SAR bird up from the Coast Guard. If she doesn't have the number to SAR because I haven't left it there, or if I don't have it with me, so, with my sat phone, I had all the critical numbers I needed to call. So it's like, oh, I need a helicopter. I need it over my head right now. Dude, done. But I'm not going to try to carry my buddy out over my shoulder. I'm going to call for help. Or
how are they going to make a movie out of that?
Or if the weather's bad enough,
if you don't carry him over your shoulder.
Yeah, well,
I want to see you carry me.
We would just quarter you up and carry you out.
Exactly. The only option is 8 feet tall.
But the other thing is, can you just stabilize somebody and make them feel relatively comfortable?
Yeah.
Can you stop bleeding? Can you keep an airway? Those are the two biggest ones. And then can you somehow mitigate some of their pain?
I think if you stuff a Blue Chew in the wound, it'll swell up and and clot it.
You could probably use Blue Chew for altitude, but.
Well, you could be able to do both. So you could stabilize and call for higher level care at the same time if you have those resources
absolutely,
available.
You should be.
Yep.
But so I have gotten some people out of the mountains that have had altitude sickness and probably trending to pulmonary edema. But most of the time they were ambulatory. But when they started to go down and I literally, I couldn't drag them or carry them out, you're gonna hurt them, right? At that point you need to call for a higher level of care. And so you have to have the capacity to do that. But to sit there and go, I'm going to bring a sled and I'm going to do this, and I just think it's a bit much, especially if you don't have the care. So I'm not going to sew somebody up in the field. To include myself, I have cut myself really bad a couple times with broadheads and some of the different scalpel knives that I've got. And what do? I know how to put compression or compression on. I know how to stop the bleeding. I know how to just take care of that. And I get myself out of the field,
Yeah. I think the key point in that is not pushing it once you realize you need to get the hell out of there.
I don't think you should push it.
Especially if there's two of you. The best thing, it's no different than if you're in a plane and they say, okay, if we're going, if we're losing altitude and the oxygen masks come in, put it on the child first. Because the parent has to be the one that actually has the brains in the matter. I think if you're trying to be the hero and pull that person out when you have the ability to contact help, you're going to wear yourself down to the point where you might go into a panic mode or a fight or flight mode, and at that point, most people aren't going to be thinking straight. So you're not doing any good for either of the two. I mean, if you have the ability to make good decisions and make contact, make them while you're making good decisions. I mean, that's what
Yeah,
I would think.
I think that's good advice. So my first aid kit, for instance, is pretty basic, pretty small, pretty rudimentary.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got some good skills, but I don't practice them all the time. They're perishable, but I have the ability to communicate with people who actually have the skills and can get that person out of the field. I've got a couple stories, and I mean it's been touch and go. Even when the person's ambulatory but hurting real bad, and they're bleeding, and we've got it to stop. Like they're not hitting on all cylinders, and you're trying to get this person out, and you can get yourself in some situations. And you're like, you know what? Maybe we just need to stay kind of right where we are and have somebody come to us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, don't try to be the hero. If you see something trending in the wrong direction, just accept the trend and go with it.
Yeah, but you are the hero if you can manage that situation and get somebody to help you. That's managing the situation.
But Barklow, they don't make movies about that.
No, they won't make.
Damn
a movie
it!
about
Just
it.
remember, most movies that were made are from a catastrophe, and somebody probably died. So don't be that person.
People normally, yeah.
Yeah, just avoid the movie. All right, water purifiers. Which ones do you prefer? Which ones should you stay away from? And just be broad. You don't have to go brand specific if you don't want to.
Yep.
Do you even carry a water purifier, Doug?
I've got a blue straw. I don't even
Like
know
a life straw.
Yeah, it's a life straw.
Explain what that is.
It's literally a straw with a little reservoir on the end that I'm assuming is the water filter.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time I was in situations where I was really back for a long enough period of time to where I had to pack that stuff, I mainly packed purifier tablets and that blue straw because both were super light, and that was it. So I'm probably not the best person to ask.
So if you're going into the backcountry, you have to figure out how you're going to filter your water, right? And I mean, I'm not going to tell you I do it all the time. I rarely did it in Alaska just because I kind of felt I didn't need to, but I don't recommend that for people, certainly in the lower 48. There's actually a lot of misinformation out there, and I don't think people do it on purpose, but I think that they don't necessarily understand everything that they're trying to accomplish, right? So the biggest thing when you ask people about filtering water, what's the biggest thing? The biggest thing is giardia, right? That's what they hear these, I believe they're cysts, right? And so you want to get that out of the water. The reality is you're probably not going to be hit with giardia when you're in the field, because I think it's like a 7 to 10 day gestation period. So most of the people are out of the field, right? But nonetheless, so there's the two best courses of action are you can either boil the water, which requires fuel, which means you have to carry more fuel, and in the middle of summer nobody wants to drink hot water, so then you have to let it cool. So for the most part, that's not super effective. And the next one is having some kind of pump. And so the pump is small enough, and there's different kinds of filters, but ceramic's a real good one. And you can pump your water, and the water that comes, say, out of the stream into the bottle is clean. You can drink it immediately. Like, you can filter it, drink it, filter it, drink it. And what that's going to do is it's going to take giardia out, and it's also going to take any of the silt and things like that make the water turbid, right? To make it look brown. So you're not drinking a bunch of algae and things like that. And yeah, it might require some back flushing, but for the most part, it's a great tool. When you start to get into cold weather, there's some side effects with that. So ceramic filters, even if you pump them all the way dry, they can still have residual water, and they can crack, and you might not know it, and you may.
Yeah, you're not actually filtering what you think you are.
Correct. So there's that, and there's boiling, and then the other one is people say, well, I'm just going to use tabs. It's like, okay, great. Well, read most of those tabs, and when you read the tabs,
there's a sitting period.
There's exactly right. So you and it's based off a lot of things. It's based off the turbidity of the water. It's based off the temperature. Well, you know what? You're not going to fucking deal with any of that. So you're going to dip your Nalgene bottle in the water, and if there's any floaties floating around, they're still going to be in the water because you haven't filtered it. And then you're going to drop a tab in, okay? And then that tab has to sit for, if you want to be safe, it's got to sit for 4 hours. So you're going to have all this water. You can't drink it for 4 hours. You need to make sure that all the the cap and all the threads and everything are treated because it's been touching the quote contaminated water, and then you have to wait 4 hours and then you can drink it. So it's good, and I always carry tabs in case I get myself in a situation where I need to use them.
Yeah.
But again, for my way of thinking, is not the most efficient method of water filtration. So now they've got, different brands have these big 3-liter bladders, and they've got a bladder with a hose, and it filters through one of these ceramic type filters, and then it goes into another 3-liter reservoir. So you literally just scoop up 3 liters, hold it up or hang it up. It filters 3 liters into another 3-liter bladder, and you're good to go. Yep. And you can back flush them and all this kind of stuff. So I think for the most part, and there's all kinds of different pumps and stuff, I think for the most part that most people, if they're going in the backcountry, should have some kind of water pump. Yeah. And then back yourself up by either having tabs or something. The other one's a steri pen. So
I was going to ask you, what do you think about the UV pens?
So I think they work great, but again, they're lightweight, they work, they're effective. But if you have floaties in the water, so if I'm going to the high country and the water source I'm going to get is this pure high mountain stream, like you're really not going to worry about that. But so it really kind of, and I've got a whole bin over there of water filtration and purifiers, but which are totally two different things. But it really depends on where I'm going, right? So
or the time of year, because like where we were in BC,
the time of year.
Obviously, when it's runoff, I mean, even if the water's really good in that area, which a lot of times you could drink out a lot of the natural springs, but when it's runoff, like you're gonna get, I've had several friends that get beaver fever because they're like, this is fine.
What's beaver fever?
Well, it's pretty much like.
There's.
I don't know. I think you could probably shit on that garage door over there from right here if you wanted to.
I couldn't tell you medically what it is, but basically it's a water. Like if there's beaver dams and stuff like that, like and it'll affect you. If I recall correctly, it'll affect you a lot quicker than Giardia, and you'll wish you were dead.
Yeah, it takes about a day is all.
And if you're in the backcountry,
full stream diarrhea.
Yeah.
And if you're in the backcountry, so and you have diarrhea,
you'd be dehydrated.
You're going to start dehydrating yourself. Like it's not a good deal.
No.
So you need to kind of protect yourself, and
so you have to know where you're going, and then you have to know, like I said, there's times where we were, there's natural springs where, during moose season when it's not runoff, there's natural springs where literally a lot of the locals learn those areas. There's little pipes coming out.
Yeah. You
can fill your bottles up. You kind of go by there every few days, fill up. But then you wouldn't do that same thing for a spring bear hunt if it's runoff. If there's runoff and there's obvious, melting, casting across everything, then at that point it's pretty tainted if the runoff's at the right phase. So you kind of have to you have to know where you're going and what those situations are like. Some of the areas where we were in France, we would have been fine with some of the spring water that was up there. But then there was other areas where obviously once you get down, like if we went down into the bottom of the valleys below the pig farms, you're not going to be diving into that.
I don't drink any water from the lowlands. Even in Alaska, I didn't. If you're going after moose or something like that. But if I'm up in the high country, mule deer or sheep or mountain goat or something like that, if it's coming off, if I can see that it's coming off a snowfield, I may not choose to filter it. Certainly in the winter, if I'm just melting snow for water, I don't melt the snow and then filter it. I just use that as a water source. But it's important because you want to stay hydrated. So you need to drink enough. That shouldn't be a component where you're like, well, I'm not going to drink today because I couldn't have an effective way of purifying water. It's like that's not a good excuse.
See, I go through a lot of fluids, so I wouldn't go somewhere even if I'm bear hunting. I have probably 2 liters of water just for a day's bear hunt. So I wouldn't go somewhere like that. If I know that I need tabs to clean my water, I need to be a day ahead of that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going there and saying, damn, I'm thirsty, then obviously tabs were a very poor option for you because
your planning sucked.
Yeah, your planning sucked. You need to be like, okay, I'm going to take a 1 gallon bladder, fill this thing up, put tabs in it, and then now I have a gallon to last me through the next day. And at the end of the day, I'm going to fill this thing up again.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop these in at night. In the morning, I'm going to be able to fill up for my day. I mean, when I would use tabs, that's what it'd be. The straw would be with me just in case it's like I got
a drink right now.
I have to drink right now. And that's what it was.
Is there any water purification you would avoid? Any type? Or just have something, but just know the limitations of it? Is there anything you would...
I think more importantly, people need to understand the limitations of it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's from a guy who went on a sheep hunt with a buddy, and all we brought was tabs because we thought we were badasses. and then like 3 days...
Oh, the best lessons.
And then like 3 days into it, because I was bored, and it was storming outside, I read the package, and it said you have to wait 4 hours. And I'm like... That would have been good to know about 3 days ago because we were giving it like 15 minutes and we never got anything, but I mean,
which is called luck.
Yeah. And you know what? You can't count on luck all the time.
Yeah.
So
Dudley was with me when I offered a Canadian guy a choice of he could either give me his last bottle of water or I was going to take it. He's profusely sweating in a set of galoshes and a onesie at that time.
I would have drank that water right out of his boots. Like, I probably would have just got my straw out and just went for the boot water.
That was the day Dudley had his first kill cliff.
Yep, oh, yeah. It was. God damn, that tasted so much better than hot pill water.
Oh, man. So here's what maybe a good one to end it on in the survival stuff. Because
we're not even close.
Well, all right.
Jeez, why are you wanting to get out of here?
Ultimately... What I would like to be good at is cutting tracks and going where the signs lead me. This will obviously require spending lots of time in the big woods, which New England is full of. I'm absolutely committed to this style of hunting, but I'm looking to gain more skills in survival. I know you're doing some upcoming podcasts with Dudley and Barklow about survival. My question is, where can I go to gain skills and experience on how to survive in the wilderness? Because asking questions to people who can answer them is great.
Yeah.
But... not everybody's question is going to get answered. So where would you start people on their journey to educate themselves?
We got to do that, man.
Do what?
We got to do an experience.
I don't know if anybody would survive.
Yeah, but it'd be fun trying.
Yeah.
Everyone would be dead of dehydration by the second night.
I know. I'd be fine, but they might die.
If we had a class of 10, we'd probably need 9 IVs.
I was thinking 14, but... I mean, but I get this one too. I mean, I know some stuff about survival. I know you know some stuff about survival, Dud, and Barklow knows a ton. But you went places to learn those things.
I did. I went to.
Yeah,
I went to
tough.
civilian. For the most part, I went to civilian schools. I went around the country.
Yep. So somebody has nothing. Where would you?
What was the best one you ever went to?
Or I'd like to fill in 12 months of what you would do in 12 months.
So first of all, I don't know if I could say there was any specific one.
Yeah.
There's common themes, right? And I think those are the things you need to take. But, if I go to a survival course in the Philippines and learn jungle survival, and then go down to Florida, and then go to Maine, and then you come up to Alaska, like there's all the basics, which quite frankly, Andy, I think that's really what people need to know. Like, people want to know, when they think survival, it's like, what kind of plants can I eat? And this kind of stuff. And it's like, dude, if I'm eating plants, I'm severely fucked, and I didn't bring my sat phone, and I don't have my inReach, and the SOS, and the world came to an end, and I'm basically the only guy out there, and I'm fucking eating leaves.
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of fucked, right? But you should know, maybe in the specific area you're going, like in Alaska, like there was all kinds of berries during hunting season. So it's good to know what kind of berries you can eat.
You don't want to pop
to supplement,
one
and stuff like that. But it's like, okay, how do can I purify water? Can I start a fire? And how do I do that? And what kind of knife do I need? Do I have some basic first aid? Can I build a shelter and get out of the elements? So those are basics.
Prioritize those. Because the food part, eating plants would be at the very end of that list.
Yeah, so they say you can go 3 hours, and I might have this slightly wrong, but I'm pretty sure I don't.
3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks.
3 hours without shelter, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. So food is not a priority. Now, that's not to say if you come across food that you shouldn't take advantage of it, but the biggest thing is if you're truly like without any resource, your tent, etc. Like, and it's bad weather. Well, it doesn't have to be bad weather. It could be sun exposure, whatever. Like, you need to find shelter from the elements. At that point, you need to figure out, not necessarily a fire, but I would say you need to figure out where you're going to get water. If you think you're going to be there for a prolonged amount of time and you don't already have water, then I think you need to figure out within that shelter, how do I insulate myself from the ground, like we talked about, those kind of things. Then I think, depending on the resources you have, because you don't want to expend, right, all your reserves, like walking around trying to find firewood and do a bow drill, but maybe you want to start a fire at that point. More importantly, you need to figure out where you are, what you're doing. Do I need to signal somebody? How can I signal somebody? Food would be the very last thing, right? Not that if a bunny comes in front of me and stands there, I'm not going to club it over the head and want to eat it, but I'm not going to expend all these energy reserves chasing rabbits through the woods, you know, trying to kill one, when really I should be.
Because your tummy's grumbling.
Correct.
Yeah,
where I should be having a secure place from the elements and trying to you know, have some water that I procured. But
yeah, if you're a game warden listening, I'm going gangster. I can tell
well, no,
you right
but
now.
if
I need to eat, I'm going gangster.
In Alaska,
sure.
if you were in a survival situation, you know, you could do that to procure food if you needed to. Not that, you know, you should be, you know, shooting bald eagles or anything.
Yeah,
but
that's also Alaska. If you're out in a desert environment or high desert somewhere, it might not be a choice.
But you know, to answer this gentleman's question, I would say find a survival school either in the area you live or the area you hunt. So maybe where you live is not the area you hunt. But like and I don't know all of them, right?
Yeah.
I just know the couple that I went to. But
how did you find the ones you went to?
Basically we you know, through our network, but we asked around and got, basically it was word of mouth.
Okay.
Like, who were the most badass dudes in this environment, and that's where we went. And a guy, you know, the same guy who taught desert did not teach jungle, did not teach mountain survival. Like, they just didn't, because they were specialists.
Yeah.
And so they knew exactly.
Well, let's simplify it though. Let's say there's no jungle in the U.S.
Yeah, so you
just
don't have
hypothetically,
so you don't have to do that.
Mississippi, Florida.
Yeah. Okay. Well, who are the people within our community that you value their opinion on this subject? Because they'll be able to listen to those people and pick up parts. Like, you know, I would value some of the things, you know, Remy obviously does it well. You know, are there people that you would say, if you're constantly in the outdoor community, these people give good information, these people are good writers? I mean, do you have people that you value to where you think people could get good general?
I don't. Not anymore.
I don't either, actually. Yeah, that's a good question. I can't think of off the top of my head.
I was listening to a podcast with Aaron Snyder on KafaruCast, and he had a gentleman on, and I listened to him, and he seemed, again, I haven't trained with him, but he seemed totally legit, but he had a really good outlook on it. I think the other thing is, people, I would say, if somebody asked me a survival question, I'd say define survival, because a lot of times what people are actually talking about is primitive living, right? So if they want to know how to do traps and snares and make a fish basket or a bird trap, like, that's more primitive living to me, and
most
not
people
survival.
could walk out of the woods in the time it would take them to make that.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I know they watched a lot.
No, correct, or hit the SOS button.
Yeah, Afraid,
right?
or whatever in Alaska, like
Naked and Afraid or something like that. One of those.
Instead of whittling a snare for, you know, or whatever it is for 14 hours, walk to the road.
Yeah. Well, so you know what I'm confident in saying is I can build a shelter in whatever environment I'm in. I could be in snow, I could be in the desert, I can be in the jungle. I can build a shelter, right? The other thing is I can build a fire in whatever conditions I'm in, which I think is hugely important, because a lot of people are like, I can build a fire, and they're in the campground or in their backyard, and it's Arizona, it's 110 degrees outside, and you could look at it long enough and it would start on fire, right? It's like, but could you do that if you're going to go to, say, do a sheep hunt in Alaska? Could you do that in snow or rain or whatever it is? Like, so you want to have real, solid, positive, basic skills. You know, we're talking trigger pull earlier. That's a super basic skill. But how important is that, Andy, to shooting the gun?
Depends on if you want to be successful or not.
Exactly. And so what I think most people kind of overlook is they want to gloss over the basics because they're not super sexy and get onto the more cool advanced stuff. But if you have no basic skills, I don't need to teach you how to build a figure 4 trap. Like, you're never going to use it. It's fun. We could teach you that, but value the basics first. So if this gentleman's out, and I don't know if he said where he was, but if he's tracking animals, what I would tell him is he better know land navigation. He better know how to run a GPS. I think one thing that's way overlooked is you know, well, when we were in Hawaii, it was hilarious because we were in the woods and that guy's like, I don't know where we are, and you just pulled out your iPhone and opened up Google Maps, and you're like, we need to walk 200 yards to the east, right? But I think map and compass, and then, you know, overlaid GPS on top of that, like, that's probably important. And then understanding the basics and what those priorities are. Is food my first one or shelter? You know, those kind of things, and thinking through them so that if you do get there, you're not going to panic and go, no, I think I know what to do.
New England is where he said he is.
New England, yeah. So, you know, the weather's not always great up there.
Yeah, it's big woods. Obviously, that's big woods. So, I mean, it's easy to get turned around. So, you know, it's easy to get turned around when everything looks the same. But I think one of the things that's really common in all of your replies to the different questions Andy threw at you, there's probably no one perfect place to go to know it all. Yeah. But there were several things that were reoccurring in what you said: shelter, fire, hydration, food. Yep. You know, probably maybe in that order. Would you agree? Most likely. Okay, so, you know, those are 4 different topics that you can find people or find a way to learn those 4 very, very important basic skill sets to where those are going to be more valuable than you going to a Bear Grylls 2-day class. Yeah. Like, go somewhere, learn how to navigate, learn how to build a shelter properly based on the area either that you are or that you want to be, and, you know, be prepared to build a fire. And, you know, and honestly, when it comes to one of the things that I've learned is if you've been outside enough and you learn your body, knowing how to layer is almost it's like the number 5, and it would probably go to the front of that whole line. Correct. If you don't know how to layer and go into the field to where you're going to be able to make it a full day just based on either what you have, how much you have to move, how much you have to put on once the sun goes down and the inversion happens. If you don't know how to deal with that, that's a big problem. I mean, because you're literally going to freeze to death because you don't have the right clothes and you don't have no idea what to do. I mean, I've had a lot of people that are like, well, you know, I just went out and just had this on. It's like, well, shit, dude, don't you know it drops 30 degrees at night and you're out here with spandex on? I mean, this is kind of stupid, you know. I mean, you didn't want to pack something that actually has an insulation value for when it's dark, and now we have 4 miles back out of here. Right. You know, yeah, we're going to be moving, but shit, dude, what if you shot a bull? We got to sit here and freaking cut on this thing for 3 hours and then start making trips. You know, you need to be able to think ahead. You have to know. And what a lot of people pack is far less than me. I'm actually, because I'm so tall, like, you know, my feet and hands and, you know, my lower legs, they get colder than most people that are shorter in stature. And because of that, I have to bring 1 layer more than a lot of people if I'm in a stagnant position. And that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. Or I have to know, if I want to survive, I need to keep moving. If we're going to stop, I need to stop and make fire, because I'm fine moving, but when I stop, I don't have enough right now to stay warm unless someone has that they don't need. You know, I think that's like number 1 on that list. And then it falls into those 4 basic elements to learn to do those 4 things good, and you're going to be able to make it out of there. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's not like, you know, I don't think most of the people asking these questions are trying to go to like the northern parts of Russia where, you know, no one's seen a person in a while. Yeah. I mean,
well, so I think we talked about it on your podcast, but, you know, me and Preston and what was the other guy's name?
Trevor?
Which one?
The guide.
Oh, Dusty?
No, the other guy.
Bert?
Bert.
Oh.
I can't believe I forgot Bert's name.
No kidding.
But, you know, we got dropped off in the boat, right? And so, Andy, obviously this is, you know, right up your alley. Like, oh, you get dropped off on a boat, and the boat will be back.
Why didn't you guys swim to shore?
And the boat, I wanted to, but Bert couldn't swim.
All right, fair enough. He could have held onto the dry bag.
And Preston was crying, I think. But
he could have stayed in the boat.
Bend your
you know,
mic
get
a
dropped
little
off on the
closer to
beach.
your mouth.
Get dropped off on the boat, and it's like, oh no, they'll be right back. And so we go and you know, make that stalk on the bear. Well, they dropped you guys off way up at the end of the end of the bay, and I'm waiting. We're waiting. And Bert's getting upset, you know, and this and that, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, this is gonna suck if the boat doesn't come back. But I've got a puffy jacket. I've got a bit of a ground pad. I've got a tarp. I've got everything I need to make a fire, and I've got a couple water tabs, right? And obviously, you got food in your pack, so it's not going to be like a life and death situation. Really, at that point, I wouldn't call it survival. I would call it, what is my level of comfort going to be while I wait here overnight while the boat gets fixed or gets refueled, or you know what I'm saying? But
so
that
be
kind of
honest.
thing.
What percentage of you wanted the boat not to come back so other people would
0.
suffer more? No, it's not so you wouldn't suffer. It's so that other people who were less prepared suffered more.
Well, I wouldn't have minded staying there, except I wanted to go on another stalk. But let's put it this way. I know I was going to be warm and dry. I wasn't so sure about the other two because they didn't bring anything with them.
Yeah.
Right? And I've just learned enough that it's like I just bring the basics, you know. But, you know, is that a survival situation? No, we'd have done it. But what is your level of discomfort?
Yeah, but
it
that
could have
would
turned into one.
It could have very easily.
But that's argument. I mean, there's an argument there for that. I would say that wasn't really even a survival situation because worst case scenario, like maybe I'm wrong by doing this, I feel like I probably would have just headed straight north and made hit the 3 miles and been on the north side of that island and then been on the shore to where I at least I had landmarks I knew, and I could either go to camp or I could go to where the barge was.
Well, I had my GPS on me. I knew where we were and where camp was, but I don't know if Bert could have walked back there. So I'm not saying it was a survival situation. I'm saying if that boat never came back, it would be a scenario where being prepared would make it less sucky. Right.
It wouldn't have made it a matter of life and death immediately.
Correct. Now, mind you, where we got dropped off, or the beach we were going to get extracted from, like a giant, pretty good sized grizzly had just walked through there. You know, so it would have got western then. You know, if that would have started. You know,
western.
I mean, you could see how that would
You were
play out.
definitely going to be able to outrun Bert.
But I carry enough, and Trevor had the same thing, right? Like we carried enough.
Well, the one time you didn't, and you were pissed.
I was pissed because I left my pack on the boat.
He
I'm like,
left
God
his
damn
pack.
It, I know better.
He left his pack in the
It's
boat.
day one shit, Barklow.
It is day one shit, and I have to relearn lessons just like everybody else. But yeah,
The only thing I would add, I think everything you guys said is awesome, is that I would never want to discourage people from going into the field a little bit without the basics. Like if they have an understanding of their limitation and their gap, just respect that and set up the things like the drop dead time, letting people know where you are, having a plan for everything, and just really boundary yourself. Go get some experience in the field, but don't go Bear Grylls crazy if you live, I don't know, in downtown New York and you want to go try to start a fire with a string bow. It's not, it's not going to happen. Let's just say there's some editing involved in those sequences. But don't not go out in the woods. Just respect and be self-aware of where your skill level actually is.
You have to get experience. I encourage everyone, go get experience. Like
Smartly.
At the end of the day, but at the end of the day, that's the only way you're going to get better at this stuff.
It's no different than practicing archery. You know, if you want to do that, you don't do it. If you want to go bow hunting and shoot an elk with your bow, don't go the day of season elk hunting.
Yeah.
Don't go buy a bow the day before and then go out elk hunting.
Or just shoot spots at 20 yards with field points.
I mean,
and think
if
you're
you
going to
want to start doing this stuff, then what you should do is you should take, like right now in the summer is the best time, or during shed season, take a trip out there to where all the elements aren't against you and just say, I'm going to go out there and camp for the weekend. And then all of a sudden you realize, man, I came out here and I didn't have this, and I had to drive back to town to get it.
Yeah.
If you do that 3 or 4 times a year, and you just tell yourself, I want to go out there and I want to not have to need my car, my phone, or my electricity for today. I'm going to do it for a full day. And then the next time, do it for 2, then do it for 3.
Yeah.
It's like you do it that way enough times, you do it a few times, then, you're all of a sudden going to understand, okay, here's what I need to do. No different than when you were a kid and, your parents put a tent out and you wanted to sleep in the backyard. You go out there and realize, Dad, I'm cold, and you come back in. Well, next time you have some blankets. Well, then the next time you leave the screen open and think the bugs are terrible. So, yeah, I mean, you just learn all these little things, and that's what you have to do. Do it during the summertime. Come out for a scouting trip. Come out for shed season. I told several of the guys that wanted to come in my area for whitetail hunting, they're like, well, hey, what's the best time to come for whitetails? And I said, best time is turkey season. And they're like, what?
That's great advice right there.
And they're like, what do you mean? I said, you need to put in for a turkey tag in the spring. You need to come out here, and you need to, the foliage is off. You can see how shit lays, and you need to come out here, and you need to develop a plan on what you want to do for whitetail season. But don't ask me in September, where's the best place for me to come whitetail hunting. If you want to come whitetail hunting, come during turkey season.
I think
it's
that's
perfect
excellent advice.
Yeah,
absolutely. I would also say maybe out west.
Come for bear season.
Because I was going to say spring bear is a great time for people to come out, especially if they're back from back east. But even out here in the west,
in the middle of the day.
I try new gear and stuff out because you have the weather can be snotty, but it's not most of the time so snotty that
not middle of the winter snotty.
It's not going to improve. The days are a little longer, and I don't discount bears. I love spring bear hunting, but if you drew a great elk tag, like I'd rather learn my lessons on a spring bear hunt than on that elk tag in September.
Yeah,
right?
Hell yeah.
So, but the turkey hunting is that's a great bit of advice.
Next question.
All right, you guys want to do another one?
Are you hearing Barklow fine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can hear him a little bit, but not great.
I can always hear
I can hear
fine.
you good.
I don't know what to tell you about that. Heat stroke. All right, I figure most of the questions you'll be receiving for these situations will be more cold weather oriented due to the hunting aspect. But I wanted to ask a survival question about the other side of the spectrum. I was doing some backpacking in July in the maze of Canyonlands NP. Do you know where that is, Barklow?
Yeah,
Northern
Utah.
Peninsula?
Northern Peninsula? Where's the NP?
National Park. Canyonlands National Park.
Oh, what did he say on the first part?
The maze of Canyonlands
Oh,
NP.
I didn't hear that part.
And had a situation which I was becoming unsure whether or not I was experiencing symptoms of heat stroke / heat exhaustion.
I think that's the silent killer, actually.
It was definitely a scary experience having that happen in such a remote environment like the maze, and I feel like both recognition and treatment of this type of scenario could have been much more difficult when solo. Yes, it definitely would be. Fortunately, I was with a partner this time, but I like going out alone. Any of you guys' thoughts would be great. Survival expert John Barklow.
You may know as much, if not more, than me, being a second phase instructor, about heat stroke and heat exhaustion.
Yeah, it is silent.
Yeah,
it is
I think
definitely silent.
Once you know you have it, it's too late.
That's the problem.
Once you know you have it, you're screwed. It happened to me on a billy goat hunt.
Really?
Well, did you recognize it, or did somebody else?
I actually recognized it once I said I got to sit down, and I realized like my right eye was just like going down, and I literally got to like an extreme version of altitude sickness with dehydration, and then I was just shut down. It's like I knew I needed to hydrate, but that's not a quick recovery.
No. Yep.
I mean, when you hydrate, it was 4 or 5 hours of I need to let all this stuff catch back up.
Plus core body, you got to lower the core body temperature too. That's where the ice baths in the second phase tank.
Yeah.
Like if we had full submersion, but not crazy, like put them in the water first, then add a little bit of ice, then continue adding ice while trying to hydrate. They're getting an IV thrown at them at the same time.
Yeah, but if you don't have that and you're just trying to hydrate based on what you have on a hill,
takes a long time.
It is a long time. Shade, if you can get somewhere where just think of like what a dog would do. If you can get somewhere where there's cool dirt, get under some rocks, get somewhere where there's cool dirt to where you can try to obviously lower your body temperature while hydrating. But I mean,
well, let's go even farther back.
But I
tips
think
for avoiding in the first
I was
place.
going to say,
that's the thing.
I think you need to understand maybe how to avoid it, and then
Layering actually plays into this as well too.
and I'll try to remember some of the classic signs and symptoms. The funny thing with the classic signs and symptoms of heat stroke. And,
Isn't it almost the same as O2 toxicity? The vision blurry, ears ringing, nausea, all that stuff.
That's on the extreme side.
I wasn't going to go there. I was just going to say that hypothermia and heat stroke,
Hypothermia and hyperthermia
are they're basically, it's like you're drunk. And
yeah,
so
they're bro and sis.
half the time when we're hanging out, it's hard to tell if somebody's got hyperthermia or just drunk,
or if they're
right?
pussy.
Right. but you know, you start
sure.
but you know, you start to get confusion. And you know, the biggest one because he specifically talked about heat stroke,
You'll notice you're slowing down.
But
and
when you
coordination.
stop sweating, because you've been sweating, which is your body's natural reaction to, you know, put moisture on your skin to kind of promote that convective heat loss, and all of a sudden you stop sweating, like that is, if I recall correctly, that is where you're really kind of effed up, because to kind of try to reverse that,
Well, it's late into the game.
is really difficult. But you know,
and avoiding that, like when I go into the field, I know in 5 minutes if I messed up on what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
Because you're profusely, like, if you
Yeah,
whatever
you're approaching this question from the best direction.
Yeah, like you go into the field and 5 minutes in, you're profusely sweating with not a lot of effort. You need to stop and readdress and reevaluate what it is that you're wearing. Like, I know people who've had Gore-Tex on and didn't realize it. You know, that's not awesome for allowing moisture to wick away. And it's like, like what I put myself into the field, I try to put myself on the edge of being uncomfortably cold when I start moving, with the goal of being not hot, not even warm, but right flirting with the edge of I'm not cold, but I'm not warm. I don't want right in that zone.
My sweat to freeze on me.
I don't want to sweat, actually, if I can. I want to ride that edge.
We were on that edge the entire time in France.
Francais? Oh, yeah. Well, when your pitch is 89 degrees.
No, we were seriously on that line.
Oh, yeah.
Of how do you not dress enough to where your fingers aren't, where you're not having frostbite?
Yeah.
But if I put on any more,
I'm
sweating too much, and then I'm going to be colder. I know if we say there's a chamois and we have to get down in glass, within 20 minutes my teeth are going to be chattering.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to know that line.
Yep.
But I think the key to hunting is the ability to continually hydrate. I mean, and literally recognizing hyperthermia, or I guess dehydration. If you're hyperthermia, I think all that stuff comes down to having cool water, and recognizing how much you're actually sweating out versus what you're putting in.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, when you start to feel like you're tripping up, or you start bumping logs and kind of those are all like early signs. Those are early signs of a form of exhaustion.
Yep. You start to lose coordination.
Yep.
I like to say people need to be a willing participant in the activity, right? And so if you and I are going out, and I don't know what this person, if they're referring directly to hunting or just hiking around canyon lands, but
more just recognizing, I think, heat stroke, heat exhaustion.
Yeah. But so you can choose when you want to go hike. So you want to go hike in the heat of the day, or you want to start early in the morning.
Yeah.
How much water not only do you bring, but how much water did you take on board to kind of inflate your cells before you left, right? You need to understand that if I'm going to all of a sudden go, man, I'm thirsty, and I'm going to chug a liter of ice cold water, it's going to sit in my gut, and the gastric emptying is not going to be quick as much as, okay, I put something in that water and I just continually take small sips to where I put it in my gut, it's assimilated quickly. I put it in my gut, it's assimilated quickly, right?
Yeah.
What are you eating? So if you throw a bunch of food in your belly and then you put water Like that water it's going to go to the digestion of that food before it, goes to your muscles and things like that. So, but you're an active participant. So to your point, if you're hiking and you're sweating your ass off, you have the choice to slow down.
Yeah.
Right? You
Or
have the
strip
choice
layers
to
we
take
did,
off
yeah.
the
Yeah.
clothes, right? And so it's this constant, like, I don't know if people just assume that we go out there and because we've done it so much that we don't think about this stuff. It's all that's running through my mind,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, better take this off. Oh, better add this back, right? It's this constant, like, regulating, just like a gas pedal on a truck. Like, it's the same thing. Going too fast, going too slow, putting on a layer, rolling up sleeves, taking off a layer. All these things that you're trying to do.
Well, it's why I like the stuff you guys make. It's got zippers in the armpits on some stuff.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm not going to stop to take this off, but I'm going to vent the inside of my legs and my armpits. And then when I stop, the puffy jacket comes out and it goes on. It's I've learned my lesson the hard way. First trip I ever did in Kodiak, we went on a snowshoe, and I was all excited and just and the easiest place to be on a snowshoe, actually, I agree, or I believe this from walking point, is the guy up front, because I knew the pace and I knew the route and I knew when I was going to stop. And everybody else in the back is like, God damn it, will you just slow down?
Yeah, right.
So you're
Right.
trying to keep up. And so then you start sweating, and you start sweating in that Arctic environment, which I did on my first snowshoe, my first trip there. And then we stopped for like an hour, and it was the pendulum swing from sweating to freezing my ass off
Yeah.
occurred in about 5 minutes, and I was
Yep.
miserable. I'm like, oh my God.
I think a lot of times that first day when you're in a new area is the toughest because you don't technically know the pace or the prep. Like after the first day in France, by the time you came in, you and I had a checklist. I kind of had a checklist for you by the first day, but then by the third day, you and I were in check with one another, which is important when you're hunting with someone in camp. I was telling him, I said, hey, do you have 2 endurers? And you said, yeah. And then I said, okay, you said, I got two bottles of water, 2 endurers. So I said, okay, I got four waters, because it's not just water. When you're like, when you're sweating hard, and you look at your hat, and if you have a black hat and it's completely white, that's mineral loss too, and electrolyte loss, which you need. Those all play into every single one of these negative things that we talked about.
Plus Hunter with the gastric emptying.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
he was the worst yet.
Purging everything that he had.
Well, here's the thing. You do need to recognize there's a couple things there. One, if you're in a camp where you're also having a lot of fun too, and you're partying, you go out after a night of drinking like we do most of the time.
You need to plan for it.
Yeah, and then you don't end the night with hydration and start your morning with hydration. You're putting yourself in a very negative situation off the get-go. If you go out, you have some beers, you have some drink, say there's 5 of you in elk camp and someone shoots a bull on the first night, everyone comes back, you pack that bull out, it didn't seem that hard, but you came back, everyone's eating late, you freaking have some celebration drinks, you guys stay up a little bit late, you get up, you've had 2 hours less sleep that night, so you get up early so the other 4 guys can go out. You get up, you're a little bit slow going to it, but you're still excited. You make a big pot of coffee. You take some coffee, you're drinking coffee as you go out. You're dicked.
Yeah.
You're 60% in the dehydration.
You're right there. That doesn't sound like that's that bad of a thing, but what I just said, you are, if you're not on top of that ball game, hydrating and sipping, like from the start of that morning, especially on an elk hunt, if you just did it the way that I just said, you are in for a bad day the next day by midday, because you're already in the negative. I mean, you're going out there, coffee before hydration isn't good on, an exertion type element. It's one thing if you get up, hydrate, have coffee, because we all would. But if you neglect that hydration portion, and that's why I'm such an advocate on kill cliff in the hunting situations, man, because the vitamins and the electrolytes
You should have
and
seen
stuff,
his face the first one we had, laying on the clay by a
could
red
feel it
truck.
soaking into my body.
Canadian was upturning his boot, and it just was pouring out like Niagara Falls. And Dudley was just, what is this stuff?
Yeah, that was like when I had my first Coca-Cola as like a 5-year-old. I was like, my eyes totally changed. What?
Yeah. So for this person, I think, yeah.
We covered it.
We did.
Yeah.
Stay ahead of it. And I'll be honest, like the
Pick your times, too, was a very valid point.
That one, and I like going out alone. I get that. I like doing stuff on my own a lot as well, too. But you have to recognize the danger that's involved with that as well, too. Yeah. So then it goes back to you need to let somebody know. You need to have a drop-dead time. You need to have a communication plan. And if you're going to go out in the desert, like, I mean, I don't think I would recommend that. I mean, do it if you want to.
Yeah.
I would say it's not advisable.
It sounds foolish.
I mean, I've hunted a lot by myself, and like I said, I put my poor wife through probably more, worry than she needed. Just on my private side, right? Just going out hunting, let alone my professional life. But you also have to be if I'm climbing by myself or skiing by myself. I've done a lot of that. You have to be more conservative. You actually have to understand that
that's a really good point.
There is more. You are taking on more responsibility, and you don't. I'm not talking about pushing the ragged edge, but you have to be willing to accept more responsibility and back off of what your limit is, because there is no extra help. And quite frankly, it's completely bullshit if you think, well, I'm going to go out by myself and push a ragged edge, and I'll just hit the SOS button, and somebody will come save me. Like that's not the solution either. Assuming you can hit it, right?
Go down there.
So but there's a responsibility you have when you do go out yourself that you need to be able to try to manage more of those things than if you had a buddy there to help you.
You need to stay really far away from what I would consider to be your 50% level.
Yeah, you need
if you're by yourself.
Yeah.
The time to strap on 9 GoPros and go big or go YouTube is not when you're by yourself.
No.
If you want to live, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of hunting situations where people are like, you're looking at an animal where if you pushed it, you could get to it. And there's been times where I've been by myself and I'm like, I know I can get over that hill and I know I can get a shot at dark, but then what does that mean?
Yep.
What does that mean? Yeah. That means I'm there an hour further from where I am. That means, for me to get back to what I need is going to be this time for me to get back or rally. And it just gets to the point where you're like, okay, this, as much as I want to do that, that's not the good decision right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't make
I
that
had pushed
decision.
a day hard to get into an area to go hunt in Alaska, and I finally climbed up into this basin, and I am not like, what are the odds, right? And I climb up into this basin, and as soon as I start glassing the basin, there's a giant brown bear right in the middle of the basin, right in the middle of it, right? And I'm like, okay, I think I can manage that, because I'm by myself. So I'm like, okay, I think I can manage that, because I can kind of keep track of him, and I can kind of keep my wind, and I can manage that.
I like all these kind ofs.
Right.
Good.
Well, it is. And then so I'm glassing some more, and sure enough, coming down the ridge, which would be if I'm glassing this big brown bear in the middle, to the left, here comes another bear, another boar. And he's coming down the ridge. And at this point where I am, like, there's nowhere to go. I either drop into the basin and the big boar in the middle sees me, I stay where I am and this brown bear runs into me, or I got to backtrack where I came from. And I had time to think about this, and I'm kind of piecing it together. And the best thing I could come up with was the smaller bear coming down the ridge had just had his ass kicked by the big bear in the middle of the basin, and it probably didn't want to see me sitting on this ridge. And I was like, you know what? If I was with somebody else, we could probably manage this differently. And I felt I had no choice but to just get the hell out of there and go, half a day back the way I came. And it's just, that was what I had to do, because that was the responsibility that I had taken on with the challenge of going out there by myself, right? So you just have to kind of manage that a little bit differently.
Yeah. Covered. Yeah. That's 2 hours of Survival 101. Anything else you two want to add before we do Survival 102 in 5 minutes? For 3 hours?
What time is it?
I actually think people are going to show up relatively soon, so we got to wrap it up.
Oh, yeah.
We actually covered quite a bit, though. Some shooting stuff, hot, cold, gear, sleeping bag, get experience. I think we covered quite a bit.
I think we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Told a story or two.
And there's like 7 times more questions.
And some
Oh, there's way more. We'll do in Park City, we'll do 102.
Yeah, let's do Park City 102, and then we'll definitely do 3 in September.
103.
From backcountry.
We'll whisper. That'll be a quiet one. Yeah. No headsets. Like, why haven't we seen any animals? I don't know. Maybe we're talking really loud.
I think we tag out the first day, all 3 of us, and
Perfect.
then 4 days of podcasting.
All right, boys. That's it. Thanks a lot, everybody. As always, appreciate all the feedback, the emails. This particular episode specifically wouldn't have been possible without your feedback and without your questions, so thank you for sending them in. I'm trying to think of what else is new before I close it out for the week. The Black Ops t-shirt. Did a version of the Be the Example shirt. Really the only difference is the color of the writing, which is in a camouflage pattern on front and back. Same logo on front, same words on the back, cleared hot on the front, Be the Example on the back. Thank you to everybody who has already purchased the shirt. It allows me to do some awesome stuff with the podcast, buy some new gear, travel, talk to some new people. The next few weeks are all going to be sit down, I don't want to say interviews, we'll say conversations from a variety of different backgrounds, everything from extreme sports to alpinism to snowboarding. And actually next week will be our first female guest. Haven't been able to get my wife to agree to do it just yet, still working on that, but our first female guest will be next week, and I will wait till announce who that is until next week because I would like it to be a surprise. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the reviews on iTunes. If I could ask you to do anything for me, tell somebody about the podcast. And if you like it, that is. If you don't, well then don't. And I'm sorry you don't. That's all I got for this week. See you.